Any words for aspiring mathematicians, Charles, like me? I'd highly, highly recommend you fall in love with problem solving. There's a wonderful book called The Art and Craft of Problem Solving. Read that cover to cover, and if that's your cat's meow, you should probably be a mathematician. If you're bored or don't like it or having a hard time getting through it, you should really ask yourself, do I want to be a mathematician? The other thing is that if you're young and want to become a modern mathematician, then highly recommend you learn about proof assistance. And Lean, Lean, from Microsoft is definitely the best. Now, unfortunately, pedagogy isn't so good. I gave $200,000 to Carnegie Mellon University to have Professor Avogad write Lean for Mathematicians. So help is on the way, and by the end of the year or early next year, there should be a textbook for Lean for Mathematicians written by one of the top logicians in the world. Jeremy is an amazing guy, amazing professor, and his writing is just so beautiful. Also, highly recommend that you learn about computation, the theory of computation and proofwriting, and just the nuts and bolts of mathematics are so interconnected to each other these days. And it's very classical mathematical pedagogy doesn't really think too much about recursion and computing and these things. But it turns out that that kind of stuff can help you be a better mathematician these days and think about things a little differently. So starting from the foundations is a real fun thing to do. There's a very old, wonderful book from G.H. Hardy called A Course in Pure Mathematics. It was a turn of the century book. You should probably also read the other book by G.H. Hardy called A Mathematician's Apology, which is a delightful read as well. I really like Hardy's work. I'm a little biased because I studied number theory, and that was his whole thing. The Hardy-Littlewood circle method was used to prove all kinds of cool stuff like the ternary Goldbach conjecture and so forth. But yeah, so Hardy's work is really cool. And Zeet's book, The Art and Craft Problem Solving, is a really good place to start. And then learn about proof assistance as well. And then the other thing is, get used to doing typesetting early. So do all your math homework with LaTeX if you can. It's a lot harder. It'll take you 3 to 6 months to get used to it, but it'll pay huge dividends if you're good at typesetting and playing around with those things. If you're an undergrad, study for the Putnam. There's a lot of great Putnam study books and a lot of great problem books in general. Join a problem-solving group. Most universities have math clubs, and they do problems of the week, and there's kind of problem-solving stuff. Lauren Larson wrote a lovely book on problem-solving as well. And just get used to these types of problems. Usually you can measure the complexity of a math problem by how many insights are required to solve that problem. So if you look at the proof size of something, for every few paragraphs is usually one trick. And so you can rate a problem's difficulty based upon how many tricks the problem takes for you to solve. So if you're integrating, like there are a couple of interesting substitutions, and then you do integration by parts, and then you recognize there's a bizarre trigonometric identity that you can use to play around with something, and then suddenly it all just makes sense. Little stuff like that. Whenever you work on something, especially if it's a Putnam problem or if it's an interesting thing that is provable and it's known to be provable, if you work for a really, really long time, get used to alternating breaks. Your subconscious will do a huge amount of work while you have some downtime. So never try to work on a problem more than an hour or 2 hours. And just put it down for a little bit, go do something else, come back to it. But consistency is key. You have to every single day chip away, every single day do something there, and have fun with it. A lot of great YouTube lectures as well. And you should always try to be a contrarian, at least I was, where, you say, well, why does infinity exist? Really think about it. And there's a great book from Rudy Rucker called Infinity in the Mind, which talks about the topic. And then also look at the paradoxes that exist because of infinity. Probably the most famous is if you take the infinite sum of what is it, 1 to n, I think. Yeah. You actually get like -1/12 or something like that. And there's a lovely YouTube video on it. And it shouldn't be true because that's divergent. But apparently there's a way to prove it using the Riemann-Zeta function. And then there's another way, just playing around with the series, to actually show that it converges. So little stuff like that, because of the existence of infinity and other paradoxes, fun to toy with that. And again, if this doesn't make sense or it's boring, then it's not necessarily the case you wouldn't be a good mathematician, but you always have to beg the question, Well, your passion seems to be somewhere else, perhaps more applied or not. Mathematicians are obsessed with playing around with things, toying with things. You know, they really care deeply about different ways of thinking about a problem. So it's not good enough just to prove something. You have to ask, well, can I prove this with a picture? Can I prove this in a different field of math? If I have an analysis proof, do I have a topology proof that can also do that? And also elegance. So if the proof is highly technical and lots of pages of prose and a lot of delicate manipulations, then it's unlikely that that's the optimal proof. Almost always you can refine, like Andrew Wiles' Fermat's last theorem, a huge proof. The modern day version of that proof, since he proved it in 94, is much more concise and much more beautiful. So little things like that. And if that's not what you're interested in, then you're at least not going to be a pure mathematician. Best of luck. It's a dreary field. But it's cheaper than institutionalizing people. Charles, are the allegations true that you're a lizard person? No, 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 no. Not a lizard person. I'm with the snake people.